Welcome to Slaying the Craft, the show where we go inside the mind of thriller writers. I'm your host, Sabrina Thatcher, and I'm an author, a book coach, a podcaster, but most of all, a fanatic of the genre. I am so excited to introduce my guest today, which I was like, dang it, we could have actually done this in person. Brian McAuley is a WGA screenwriter and an HWA author living and dying in Arizona, and I agree, it is rough out here right now. Dying. Brian grew up in Weird, New Jersey on a steady diet of Goosebumps books and Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. He received his BA in creative writing and horror theory from NYU's School of Individualized Study before his MFA in film from Columbia University. As a WGA screenwriter, Brian has written 5 films for the Lifetime Network and numerous other projects, including Fuller House on Netflix. Brian's debut novel, Curse of the Reaper, right there, was named one of the best horror books of 2022 by Esquire. His 2023 Christmas horror novella, Candy Cane Kills, received praise from Booklist, Library Journal, and Kirkus Reviews, leading to the 2024 sequel right there, A Candy Cane Kills Again, The Second Slaying. His new novel, Breathe In, Bleed Out, will publish on September 2nd from Poison Pen. Brian teaches as a clinical assistant professor of screenwriting at the Sidney Poitier New American Film School at the Arizona State University. Pitchforks up. So, yay, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Sabrina. I'm so happy to be here.
Man, you're so accomplished. It's just like, It's amazing. So, okay, let's go into talking about it. I'm really, really excited about Bleed In, Breathe Out. Tell us a little bit about what the book is.
So Breathe In, Bleed Out tells the story of Hannah, who survived a traumatic wilderness incident that her fiance unfortunately did not survive. And ever since then, she's been having a rough go of it. She's not doing well at work or in life. She's leaning on some bad habits to cope and pushing her friends away. So her best friend, Tess, finally invites her to this exclusive spiritual healing retreat for their friends to go and enjoy themselves, and so that Hannah can finally start to move on. Unfortunately, someone or something out there in the desert of Joshua Tree seems intent on killing her vibe for good as her friends start disappearing, and she has to figure out what is going on.
Oh my gosh. So this is a slasher, right?
Yeah. So it's it is very much a slasher. This one is much more in the vein of Scream in terms of it being a murder mystery.
Okay.
Like Curse of the Reaper, I always say, is more like psychological horror about slashers. The Candy Cane books are more in the vein of like a Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers situation where you're like, who the killer is. But yeah, Breathe In, Bleed Out very much is like, even if you don't think you like horror or slasher, if you like a murder mystery, this is very much in that wheelhouse.
That sounds amazing. What excites you the most about this story?
Ooh, I mean, I think that for me, like that idea that this kind of fits in the middle of, for me, what is that Venn diagram of like thriller readers and horror readers. Like horror is my favorite genre. I grew up on horror movies and horror books, but also love thrillers. And, as you mentioned, like I've written Lifetime movie thrillers. So I think that, the intersection of there's somebody running around killing people and what is going on, there's a mystery, that feels like the middle of that Venn diagram that I mentioned that I'm excited to see. And I have seen gratefully in early reviews, like people who love slashers are definitely like, of course, this is for me.
Yeah.
But I've seen some lovely reviews from people who were kind of shocked that they enjoyed it because they kind of took a chance on it, maybe based on the cover or saw it on NetGalley. And we're like, I don't really read horror and I definitely don't like slashers, but I liked this. So
somehow
I'm like,
that's amazing that you were able to pull that off. Congratulations.
Thanks. That's my goal, is to just drag people into the darkness one by one.
The cover for this book is so gorgeous. It's red with like that pulpy art, right? Horror art. What can you tell me about the cover?
Yeah, they killed it at Poison Pen with that cover. It's definitely kind of like pulpy throwback vibes, almost like kind of like 1950s crime vibes in terms of like old paperbacks. And yeah, it just has that. It literally just like jumps off the shelf because it's got this woman literally reaching out from the cover.
Yeah.
And Yeah, that's another thing. I'm grateful. I've been blessed with some pretty wonderful covers that really kind of sell the experience that you're going to get. And this one definitely has the kind of pulpy, campy vibes baked into it too.
Yeah. Did you come up with or are you like, hey, this is kind of what I'm envisioning, or was it totally like they just came up with it?
It would, for both the title and the cover, it was like a collaborative process. Like I had a different working title when I sold the book to Poison Pen, and their marketing team kind of came up with a list, and we ruled out certain ones, and then we tested them. So I'm so happy that Breathe In, Bleed Out is where we landed, because
Yeah.
I love that title. And then similarly with the cover, they presented a handful of very different covers, and we kind of tested to see which one. And this was always the one that I hoped would win, but I was like, I'm gonna let the process be process, and gratefully it did win. But yeah, people judge a book by its cover.
They do. They do.
Yeah.
As much as we say don't, it's true. It does
Yeah.
happen. So where did the idea for this story stem from? From Hannah having like lost her husband, and then this like escape into the desert, which I get that. I feel like you were working some stuff out as my guess.
Always. I don't always know it until I get to a certain point. I'm like, oh man, now I see what I'm working through here. But it really did start with, I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years before I moved to Arizona a couple of years ago. And so wellness culture, and especially the industry, and especially the icky sides of it, was something that I always felt like I want to do a horror story like about that industry and that culture. And it occurred to me that a wellness retreat really is a great location for like a locked room mystery and a slasher where people are getting picked off. And especially for me, as someone who I like to get very specific and creative with my kills. And so I was like, oh, okay, this place, we've got hot springs and yoga and sound baths, and I can just take all of those and turn them into murderous.
So much to work with.
Yeah.
So many murders to have happen. That sounds amazingly fun to write.
It really, and that's for me, like, that's the jumping off point, is like, what would be fun to write? And let me reverse engineer a story that will allow me to have as much fun as possible. And so it really did start with those set pieces kind of on a cork board, and then reverse engineering, like, okay, well, this is set at a healing retreat. So my character clearly is someone who needs some kind of healing. And I knew I wanted a kind of dual mystery of what exactly happened with her and her fiance. How did he die? Because she clearly carries a lot of guilt over it and is literally haunted by him. So it was fun to kind of combine like this dual mystery factor and send her from one terrible experience into a whole nother one.
Okay, so for you, it's the plot is coming first, not character. Is
Yeah,
that common, or?
I would say so. I mean, yeah, similar with like Curse the Reaper, it was the idea of like, ooh, like what if an actor who played a slasher villain like gets replaced in the reboot, and then he starts to become the character as he fights to get it back. Like I start with that premise, and then it's like, okay, what's the most dramatic and specific character I can put into this story? And for me, then the character, it kind of helpfully kind of limits and clarifies like who the character is based on the premise, which to me, like as a writer, I prefer having more containers so that I'm not faced with like a million choices and it could be anything.
It's impossible. Analysis paralysis is so real. It is
so
real.
And that's, it's something that comes up in my classes as well when I'm working with students as they're developing their ideas of like, sometimes you could start with a character and build a story around them. But for me, I'm usually starting with some kind of premise or idea. Candy Cane, it kind of started with, I want to write a Christmas slasher. And then the name Candy Cane, Cain, came to me first as like, oh, it's biblical, that fits Christmas. That's the name of a slasher figure. Now I have to reverse engineer like who or what is it, and who are the people that are encountering Candy Cane. So I do kind of reverse engineer characters in that way, and I find it feels organic to my process, at least.
I'm interested. I wonder if it's truer for the style of book that you're writing versus others, because like a slasher horror, like something that is, it's like the murder mystery piece of it, right? There's human issues. Anyway, so horror thrillers, they're like very similar in that way, where you're able to kind of mess with the idea of a human as a monster, which I think is really interesting as well. But I think they also lead to what I was saying. It leads to people when they go to horror movies, they're like, oh, it's this movie that does this. Like this guy runs around in a mask and he slashes everybody, right? No one's like, Sydney is a girl who is blah, 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 right? So I think thriller horror, it really lends itself to the idea of plot first versus character. I think it depends. I mean, everyone's different, but I just find it really fascinating.
No, it's a really good point when you think about how you would pitch certain stories. Is like, what are you leading with? What's the kind of sizzle, the experience that you're selling them? And I think coming from film and TV, that's definitely part of it for me, as I'm thinking about, like, I'm always trying to like pitch and sell somebody on an experience or an idea or a story. So I'm leading with, okay, what's the thing that's going to hook you quicker? And kind of work backwards from there. But it to me then, it's equally important then to make sure that there's still plenty of character development, that it is a character driven narrative. And that's kind of the real work of like, okay, now how do I get from one set piece to the next in an organic way where there's everything in between is like full of human drama that's really driving the story.
And her arc, her experience.
Exactly. The character arc is so important to me to think about, like, where does this character start and where are they going to end? And slashers lend themselves to a particular kind of final girl arc, which is fun to, lean into and pull the rug out from under at certain times. And in this book, I'm definitely playing with a very unreliable narrator because of Hannah's past trauma. She's already kind of seeing things before the horror story kicks in. So it's hard to say what's happening. And similarly with the secondary characters too, when I think of my favorite, like Scream, like I think of Tatum and I think of Randy and I think of Stu, like those secondary characters are so fun. And it was important to me to have this group of friends in this story that, you either love them or you love to hate certain characters. That's part of the fun too.
That is part of the fun.
Yes.
Probably fun to write too, of like, I'm just going to be unhinged. We're just going nuts here.
Oh yeah.
How many drafts did it take you to write this story?
This one was a unique case where I had a version of it that I wrote after Reaper that I didn't feel totally confident in. It was missing a couple of elements. And then I got the request to write something for Shortwave Books, which became Candy Cane. And so I told my agent, I was like, I think I need to put this book down and go write this new idea to kind of just like get out of my head and fix and come back to it. And when I did, it just like, it clicked really quickly. I just realized what was kind of not working. And this one took a few different drafts. But my process usually is like, I do very detailed outlines, like scene by scene, chapter by chapter. And then my first drafts are usually really short because I write kind of from a screenwriting mindset of like, let me just get the dialogue and the movement on the page to get the kind of the
set pieces,
play pieces. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in my next, so I call that my skeleton draft, and then I do what I call my flesh draft.
I love this. This is such a horror writer thing to do. That's fantastic. Okay.
So my flesh draft is when I'm like, okay, now that I've got the skeleton, let me put some meat on these bones and get like more of the interiority, more of the sensory details. And then once I have like a full flesh draft, then I can do my skin draft. And that's, when I'm really looking at the surface level polish of it.
That is an amazing analogy. It's so good. Like, because that is exactly like, it's fantastic.
Yeah. It's all body centric. And in my books, I'm just tearing bodies to pieces. So there's
like, it's just all there. So you said you do a detailed outline. Can you talk about that a little bit of like, what does that mean specifically?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, like I'll usually start with a cork board and index cards. And the goal being to get to somewhere between like 40 and 60 index cards on that board of just like one line of like, here's the dramatic crux of this scene. Here's the kill set piece. here's how it moves from one scene to the next. And I break my stories the same way I do a feature film script. So the plot points of kind of dramatic structure and screenwriting are what I use when I'm building a novel narrative. And once I have those key beats laid out in index cards, then I will have a document where I'm numbered scenes, like a paragraph for each scene, really trying to focus on, again, like who wants what in this scene, what's the obstacle, do they get what they want, and how does that organically lead to the next scene. And lately I've been getting more detailed in those outlines, and they're like my most recent book outline that I shared with my agent was like, I think 11,000 words.
Wow. Okay.
So definitely very detailed.
Yeah.
That one. So that by the time I do a draft, like I have a version of the scene somewhat pre-written. It's just not quite, fully prose oriented or fully kind of dynamically set up. It's just the crux of what the scene is. So I like that, because then I can take divergences, I can make changes in draft. Usually the characters really don't start like singing until I'm drafting, and then those are the biggest changes that I'll make, is like, oh, I thought that character was going to make this decision, but it no longer fits who they are, so it will be this character.
So do you does that come out? It comes out when you're drafting. So are you saying in your bone draft you start learning?
First of all, it's a skeleton draft.
Sorry.
Not a bone draft, but now I kind of want to call it a bone draft.
Oh god.
That's for the romance writers. This is the horror one.
Different
they both have flesh and skin drafts for sure. So
yes, it's all part of it.
I'm thinking that transition from the outline into that skeleton draft is definitely shifting from kind of a summary of the scene, which might have a line or two of dialogue if something comes to me that I'm like, this is the important piece of dialogue, that might be in the summary. But then when I'm drafting is when I'm like, okay, it's prose, it's a chapter, what's the first line and where are we and how are the characters moving through the space, just getting the roughest version down and starting to hear their voices. So I'm now I'm currently like in the middle of a flesh draft, and I'll like print out the whole manuscript and read through it and redline it to add ideas, so that when I am actually going chapter by chapter to flesh it out, I've already kind of thought through and had some ideas.
And you're able to make connections from like the beginning to the end, because that's the hard part too, is
so
like
hard.
How much time it takes from the time you write something at the beginning to your writing it at the end. I think that's the beauty of revision and editing, is you can put them together like, okay, did I actually solve this thing?
Yeah, and that's another reason that I think I find the skeleton draft useful, is that it's still in the kind of armature phase where it's still a long day, but what I do is I will carve out a whole Saturday or Sunday and say, I want to read this from front to back, because as you were describing, like, even if I take one, sleep on it in the middle of the draft, I might forget that setup that I was supposed to pay off, and like, I need to see it from start to end so that I can make sure I plug all those holes and connect all the setups and payoffs. But yeah, I wish my handwriting was better, because I'm now reading through my notes and I'm like, what the hell does that say?
What did I even say here?
Yeah.
It's crazy. What was the most fun part for you to write this story? Like,
was it
planning all the murders?
Yeah, I guess I'll implicate myself. I mean, for sure, like, I think anybody who's read my work knows that there is a certain level of glee that goes into those death set pieces. I'm a big fan of Final Destination, and so that's a big point of inspiration, that like, yes, it's going to be gruesome and gory, but it's not like a Terrifier movie. It's not like mean-spirited, and it's much more like,
those are very different levels of gore and experience as the viewer, which does kind of take me into the next question of, what do you want readers to walk away from this book feeling?
My like North Star is always fun as a writer, and so my goal is that I'm like infusing that into the book, and like, so anybody who reads the book and says like, this was such a fun read. A lot of readers I'm seeing are saying like, I read this in one sitting, which I love to hear that as well. That like, okay, that's very intentional on my part to try to keep those cliffhanger chapters turning a page. But the flip side being like, if, you know, there is, like I said, it's still dealing with some heavier topics in terms of grief and guilt, and this healing journey. So people connecting with that, I hope as well. And then definitely a level of satire, that there is a sense of humor and a poking fun at wellness culture that I think people...
That sounds just really fun to play with, actually. Yes. That's amazing. Okay, so why, Brian? I mean, you grew up with it, so I think that's the answer, but why The Dark and Twisted? Like, why are you not the next great American novelist?
I just, from like the youngest age I can remember, I've just always been drawn to the spooky stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like riding my bike to the library to get scary stories to tell in the dark. Watching Are You Afraid of the Dark on Nick at Night? Not Nick at Night. Snick.
Yeah, no, Nick. Oh, Snick. Oh, that's what we had. That's what we had back in the day.
Nick at Night was like the I Love Lucy reruns.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, you know, so it was baked into me very early. I also had an older brother who like handed me like Evil Dead when I was way too young to watch it. So there were early influences, but I also just think that the horror genre to me offers the most opportunity to kind of comment on society and play with these big kind of monstrous metaphors. And that's what I really love about the genre, is that opportunity to like have something to say, but not in such a way that it feels like a preachy, you know, like the next great American novel might feel like somebody's kind of like preaching at you through
really giving you like, this is a message.
prose.
I want you to have this message, versus like, this is fun. And there's also this message if you're looking for it, but if you don't look for it, right, you can still enjoy it. Because I think every readers read at different levels of depth as well.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, you know, an example in the film world who I love is Jordan Peele. Like Get Out is first and foremost just a really fun genre movie. But it's got all of this great social commentary baked into the characters in the story in such a way that it's not preaching at you. It's just what the story kind of is. Yeah.
So I know that you're a teacher and you teach screenwriting, but if you could teach a new novel writer one thing, what would it be? And can you teach it to me right now?
Ooh. Okay.
This is why you didn't get a heads up of what is actually happening.
I have so many. Okay. The big one for me is like scene dynamics of like, and I kind of said this earlier already, of just like, who wants what in the scene? What is the obstacle? And how does that resolution inherently create the next scene? And I show a clip to my students from the South Park creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, or is it Matt Parker and Trey Stone?
I think you had it right the first time. I don't know, but I know.
Now I don't even remember which one.
I know what they are.
Yeah. They talk about how when they break down their kind of outlines beat by beat, as I described, you shouldn't be able to say "and then" in between the beats, because that's just like a run-on sentence of random things happening. Instead, it should be, this happens and therefore this happens, but then this complication happens and therefore this happens. And that sense of cause and effect it creates such a dynamic experience as a reader. And I've read books, I'm sure we all have, where you just get lost in the like, what's even happening here? I'm not really following a through line. And so I try and I encourage writers that in every chapter, think about what is the goal of this scene, so we can kind of focus in on that and let the drama unfold around that.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And it's funny that I was just thinking about that earlier today. I was thinking about my first novel that I wrote, and what I realized is that, you know, sometimes you think about the stuff and you're like, what could I have done with that? But I realized like everything was like, this happened, and then so she found this, and then that made her go over here, and then when she did that, then she went to do this, which is, I mean, it propels the story forward. And as like a new writer, what we're thinking about is, how do I propel the story forward? But there's an extra level that's here at that scene dynamic. What you're saying is, how do I also put in a conflict? How do they fail? How do they not make it to the and then?
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Those complications, the like, but then this unexpected thing happens. And it's hard as a writer to, you're building this experience with the twists and the turns, especially when you're writing like thrillers and mysteries. And at a certain point, like I become kind of numb, for lack of a better word, to my twists because I baked them in so long ago that now on
Yeah.
whatever draft I'm in, I'm like, I forget that like, hey, that's a pretty big turning point, and we can kind of hammer that home a little bit with our character and what that feels like to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about horror versus suspense thriller writing.
Mm.
So they're all very close, right? All in the same like darkness stuff. But what do you really think what's the difference and difference as a reader and a writer?
Such a good question. I mean, I think thriller and suspense novels have a certain expectation when it comes to pacing, in particular. Like there's that page turning element of like, even if it's not necessarily a mystery, like most thrillers, the goal is to like, you want to see what happens next. And I think horror is a bit more kind of wide ranging in what types of stories can be there. Like some people talk about like, I don't really need a plot in my horror. I just want like vibes. I just
Yeah.
want like the atmosphere, and like I totally get that. And there are so many different subgenres,
Hmm.
whether it's body horror, cosmic horror, slasher, monsters, like ghosts. There's just like, and each of these kind of subgenres and monsters and things kind of create little different niches for the types of stories you might tell in them. But I think my goal is always kind of to meet in the in between, because I really love kind of plot driven stories. And I think the biggest difference for me in horror versus thriller, especially when it comes to like a mystery, a murder mystery, is that I think most thrillers, you see the body after the fact, or you might see the murder, but it's not going to be, super gory.
It's not the main point. Like the
Yes,
actual experience of the murder is not the main point.
exactly. And I think horror and slashers kind of lean into like, no, we're going to get into the gory details of that this is part of the promise of the genre and the experience, is that you're going to be with that character when they're being killed rather than finding a body after the fact kind of thing.
What do you think about like infusing and wanting the reader to walk away with fear versus like heart pounding suspense or like thrill? 'Cause those are
Ooh, yeah.
definitely similar, but they're different feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like the suspense for me, even like when I mentioned Final Destination, right?
Mhm.
And those movies are very much built on these big gory set pieces. But what I love about them is that like the best version of them, the best ones, the most memorable ones, are they're so suspenseful because you're seeing like a screw turning, you're seeing like the water dripping, you're like trying to figure out where and how it's all going to happen, and you're just like on the edge of your seat. And I think that thrillers have that, again, that page turning element kind of built into it. And horror for me is less about the suspense experience and more about kind of the emotion of like, again, like I am horrified by this on a deep emotional level of like,
Yeah.
I think that's why like grief horror is having a moment, because it's a deep emotional well that you can build horror stories out of, and people can kind of relate to different experiences in that way. um, so it becomes a little bit more kind of personalized and through kind of specific little traumas that we get to turn into horror
Yeah.
stories.
um, have you seen The Gorge?
I have not yet.
Okay, it's
I need to
fantastic.
watch it.
You're
Okay.
gonna love it.
Yes.
But Aubrey Plaza just was talking about her grief and
Yes.
how she felt that the gorge was like was a representation. And I was like, that is such a good representation of what that is. And like
Yeah.
the horror, I mean, it's a romance horror, which is so fun, but
Yeah.
like I was like, I would never have gotten there without that connection. You know what I mean? I don't know. It just was
Yeah.
so powerful, I thought, what she
I
said.
love that. And it's kind of what when I mentioned earlier of like horror, I feel like it's built on these metaphors, right? And so many, I think this is why I'm also like I grew up as like an emo kid, because the lyrics of like emo songs of like, I'll rip my heart out for you and apologize for bleeding on your shirt. It's just like all this like gory imagery that's like built into these like deep emotions.
Yeah.
But yeah, that being able to kind of have a metaphor for an emotional experience that is turned into a horror story is like the sweet spot.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna move on to my section that I call, it's a joke. It's not 10 rapid fire questions. It's 10 questions that maybe if you answer quickly, they'll be rapid fire. Otherwise, take your time.
Bark the answers at you. Okay.
Okay, first, what is on your desk?
Oh, so much. Okay. My desk is in front of a window, so the windowsill is full of items. I have a lot of photo booth pictures of me and my girlfriend. But this is the thing that I'll show off on the video, which is actually a gift from her, which is my Michael Myers succulent, my slasher succulent. He's always watching over me.
She knows you so well, this girl.
So well. She gets it. But yeah, I have lots of little trinkets on here that keep me entertained.
What ritual, if any, do you have before or after you write?
Ooh. Coffee.
Required.
Big time.
Write without coffee. It doesn't mean, I may not even drink it all. I just need it. It has to be near me.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I'm an early morning writer, especially like having a teaching job. My classes or meetings will usually start at 9 a.m. So I wake up at like 5:45 to write for a couple hours. And I will usually go like work out after that. So that's a bit of a ritual or routine. And on that run, I might be like thinking through story stuff. But yeah, coffee in the early morning for sure.
Nice. So if you are writing multi-POV or multiple timeline, do you write straight through like the reader experiences, or do you write each section separately and weave them together?
Ooh, my work in progress is very much multiple POVs. I write them straight through. Yeah, and I outline them the same way. What I might do at a certain point in the drafting process is just read through the individual POV chapters to make sure there's continuity. But for the most part, I'm focusing on the flow in and out of the different perspectives and the connective tissue in between.
Yeah. How do you find adding in voice, you're switching voices, like when you're doing that, is it hard to do that? Because I find it challenging. That's why I'm so curious. I ask this question to everyone, so I'm like, I don't know how to do it because it feels so weird both ways.
That's a good question. I find it fun because I might get tired of one voice every time. So like today I wrote voice from one character perspective, and tomorrow I'm gonna probably be in another character. And I love finding the idiosyncrasies of character voices through that, of thinking about, okay, how can I make this character sound different from the other? And the book I'm writing now is kind of close third for a bunch of characters. But Breathe and Bleed Out is mostly first person with Hannah. And I really kind of leaned into like, once her voice clicked, I was like, okay, I get who this person is. And that's always the best feeling.
Yeah. When you're like, and then you can find it like to be consistent. That's what, this is the question why I have the question is the consistency of voice between when you have a character in this chapter, then you've got other characters, then you come back to the chapter again and switching back into that. It's just a challenge for some people.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's where like many drafts for me, I'm like an iterative writer where I'm like, all right, I don't want to get too caught up in this on this draft, but I need to at some point focus on that voice factor.
Yeah. What is the most bullshit piece of advice you've heard?
Oh, most bullshit piece of advice. This is a good question.
There's a lot out there to choose from.
I know. That's why I'm like, I mean, I don't know if this is advice. I'm kind of like trying to reverse engineer a piece of advice that I give my students. Okay. Yeah. So I think the whole drive to be original is a terrible terrible thing. Like I think that the goal should be to draw from all of the influences that inspire you and through that find your voice as a kind of amalgamation of all the things that you love. I think that if you try to put this pressure on yourself to write a story that nobody's ever read before, or do some kind of trick that you've never seen people do before, I don't think that that's going to lead to the most authentic story from you. I think authenticity comes from all of the things that you love and that you're stealing from and you're cobbling together. All of my books are absolutely that, of like, I want to take this setting from this movie and the character from that book and the vibe from this song or whatever it is. So that's what I would say is like, don't fear don't feel like you have to be 100% original. Just go with what you love.
Yeah. Okay. I actually really like that, because I think there's a lot of pressure. I think, for everybody, but people who are like brand new writers, like, how am I going to write something that's like never been seen before, right? And then that can be a barrier to start, which I think is a sad.
Exactly. Anything that gets you to do the work and get through it, and you hear all the time that what agents and editors are really looking for is like a voice, and sometimes that can be frustrating, or you're like, what does that mean? How do I develop my voice? But for me, as a writer and as a professor, that's how I help. That's how I found my voice, was just leaning into the stories and the voices that I loved and finding mine within that, and helping students do the same has really kind of reinforced that.
Yeah. Okay. What is the darkest idea that you've had that scared you about yourself?
Darkest idea I've had that scared me. It's okay. I'm scared to admit that I don't think I've ever really scared myself with any of my terribly dark ideas.
You've never been like, oh wow, I need to take a break. What just happened?
There's definitely in Candy Cane Kills Again, there was a kill that escalated to a point where I did not expect. I feel like I can spoil that book.
I mean, it's like one of the many kills.
Yeah, exactly.
She kills a lot of people.
It's
this Christmas slasher. Candy Cane kills and kills again and just kills a lot. So.
Oh my god. There's a scene that involves her eating brains out of somebody's smashed up skull, and that was.
I thought it was it's top of the church. I was thinking. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
It's I mean, yeah, the fact that I wrote a slasher in a church is insane to begin with, but yeah, she eats brains, and I remember that was not in the outline. And once it got there, it just like the character just told me like that she was hungry, and I was like, all right, let's get you fed, girl.
She hasn't eaten in a bit, so
yeah, exactly. But I was like, ooh, this is dark, but also
amazing,
funny, and
amazing.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot.
Okay, so we talked about your drafting process, but how many drafts do you do before you share with anybody? Like, at what point in the process are you like, hey, what do you think?
Great question. Quite a few. Like, I think I mentioned, like, I will share an outline with my agent to get feedback on plot and character, whatever, from, before I start drafting. But then I'm doing at least 3, probably closer to like 5 drafts before I'm like, okay, this is a share ready draft. And each of those drafts will take a different kind of amount of time to get through. I try to write my first skeleton draft as fast as possible without looking back, because the goal is just to like have the thing on the page that I can build on. My most recent book, I got through that in less than a month.
Wow.
And now the flesh draft is taking a little more than a month. But then from there, it's hopefully just like it's a quicker process to go through and smooth out the edges and all of that. So yeah, it's just a matter of like each draft kind of takes a different amount of time. But yeah. But
it's not where you're not really, do you have a critique partner where you're just like, hey, what do you think about like this idea, that kind of thing? Or is it like you're like, it's going to be polished before anyone sees it?
Yeah, that's usually, I don't have beta readers, and I don't really kind of bounce ideas off of anybody other than again, like showing my agent an outline because I want to know kind of in the full context of the story what their experience is. So yeah, and I don't like to share a draft unless I feel like the readability is there. Like I really want like from the sentence to sentence level, because that to me has such an impact on how somebody experiences a story. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. Some people are like, they want to talk through every bit of it. They want to share everything. And then some people, I just want the whole thing polished. It's really just been fascinating to find out.
Yeah.
What part of the process is your favorite?
Ooh. I mean, definitely once I'm at the point where I'm just doing those last polishes of just making those final connections, of just tweaking those pieces of dialogue, when I can really see like all of the work that I've put into it. And I'm like, oh, hey, this is actually, it reads like a book. Like there's that transition point when it turns from like a work in progress to like, I think it's a book now. And the hardest is like, I struggle with first drafts because that blank page, even with an outline, is just like just getting the words down and accepting that most of them are not right. Just like, but I need
it is
something
really
down.
hard to do. It is really hard to be like, I don't know about you, but I put little notes in mine where I have these like two little brackets, and I just like, this is stupid, fix it later. This is terrible, keep going.
And I have, you know, when I read through with my red pen, I have little shorthand kind of repeat notes to myself that will be like, you know, elaborate or clarify, or sometimes just fix. I'm just like,
fix this later.
I don't have a fix right now, but I know it's not working. But I will also try to add really positive notes of like little hearts when I'm like, oh, that's a sweet little moment, or like a kill scene. I'll just be like, that was brutal. Just a little pat on the back.
You know what? Because no one else is giving that to you. It is so solo. You have to have, I'm just going to go on a tangent. You have to have the an insane amount of self-confidence to continue to write when nobody else is telling you that you're doing the right thing or that you're like on the right path or whatever. And then, but also the ability to be humble enough to take the critique when you find out that everything you were just doing when you were hiding it all by yourself maybe wasn't great. So like it takes a lot to be a writer.
No, it really, like you said, you kind of have to compartmentalize a little bit to get to that point, and then be ready for, you know, notes that might say like, okay, I think you did this, and so I think you can do it better or do it differently. I just today noticed I've been catching myself. This is embarrassing to admit, but I feel like it's important to that I speak out loud to myself quite a bit, which is probably a very writerly thing to do. But I've been
There's no one else around to talk to. So.
Yeah, exactly. I've been catching myself like saying little verbal affirmations out loud, like before or after writing sessions, of just like, hey, I'm proud of you, buddy. Like to myself, of like,
so nice.
Good work today. Like just to like, as you said, like there's nobody else doing that. And it's just me alone at a computer. So like, it's important to recognize the work that you're doing, because it is work, and it's a lot of work.
It's hard. It's hard. It's so like, it's so fulfilling, but it's also so vulnerable. That's why I think why it's so hard. It's like this both, like such a fulfilling, amazing experience, while also just being like, this is my most vulnerable piece of me, and it's just so scary. I don't like it.
What are we doing?
What am I doing to myself? What part of the process is your least favorite?
Yeah, I think the first draft for sure. And like, you know, the index card part is super fun. Like outlining is super fun, but then and the flesh draft is super fun because I already have something to build on. But just getting that first version on the page is literally pulling teeth, like chapter by chapter, and just like, ugh. And again, part of it is because I don't fully know these characters yet. And so one of the things I really try to focus on is to let myself kind of play and explore with backstories and tangents to see if I can learn more about them at that stage.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. I've had a experience where I'm drafting and then I get to a scene and I know what needs to happen in the scene. I know what the outcome needs to be, but then they start having the conversation and I'm like, well, I have no idea what they're saying. Like it just goes blank. Like what are they saying? What would they say? And you don't really know that until you've written and played with the characters. So that's just like, again, early writers, just like let go. Don't be precious about your first draft because it is what it is.
You'll get to that
Yeah.
draft where when you're reading through it, you'll read a line of dialogue and be like, that's not who that person is. And that's when you should recognize like, oh, because I actually know who this person is.
Yeah.
And I can revise according with that clarity.
Yeah. What is your favorite old school horror? I'm going to say horror because it's mystery or thriller, but like your old school your favorite old school novel.
Ooh.
You talked about
Okay.
Goosebumps, and you talked about Are You Afraid of the Dark? And
I mean, I'm trying to think of like Stephen King wise, because that was probably one of the earlier kind of transitions into horror. Misery is one that really sticks with me. But also kind of on the thriller side, Talented Mr. Ripley has always been like a touch point that I love. Both the film and the book, the Patricia Highsmith book. Because again, like I love, and same with like Misery as a reference point, like I don't usually gravitate towards the monsters or the ghosts. Like scary people like Annie Wilkes for me are the ones that like stick in my brain forever.
See, this is why I prefer slashers, mystery thrillers. And I don't lean into the paranormal or supernatural a ton because I think what's super scary is what we as humans do and what we do to each other. And I'm sure that there's tons of writers have heard experiences that or seen things in real life that are so intense that you actually can't put it in a book because no one's going to believe it. Like that is what's so scary about humans. It's so much deeper than a monster.
And I think, for me, like horror and, stories in general, regardless of genre, are about trying to like understand our experience as human beings and whatever levels we can. And that was why for me, like, character psychologies and like, why do people do the things that they do? And sometimes the answers are very scary, but there's a kind of cathartic fortification to kind of unpack it sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, well, Brian, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can listeners find you?
Thank you so much for having me. You can find me, I'm mostly on Instagram and Threads these days at Brian McWriter. That is also my website, brianmcwriter.com. My website has an event page with all my tour dates, which includes, September 2nd with you at Changing Hands in Tempe.
Hey.
Yes, and then I'll be all kind of all over the country. So check out those tour dates and please come see me on tour.
That is awesome. And I can say that Brian's got some really great stuff on his Instagram. So I suggest that you check it out.
Oh, thank you.
If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram as well at Sabrina Thatcher Author. If you want more information about my book coaching services, you can visit crimeandquill.com. Until next time, stay sharp and write twisted. Bye.
Bye.